Well, you might notice I'm not the normal host here. They brought back the old baggage for a trip. But I think we're going to have a good presentation today. It's my job to have gotten you into your seats, so I did that quite well. And my next task is to introduce the mayor of the business community. That's my opportunity and your liability, so we'll bring him up now. Steve Rosansky.
He actually didn't say who he was. This is Rush Hill, former mayor, former co-host of Wake Up Newport. We had to dust him off a little bit and trot him out because Alberto couldn't be here this morning. Thank you for coming, Rush. So good morning, I'm Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce. So this is our monthly Wake Up Newport meeting. We've got a great program and a great speaker here for you today. Just quickly introduce a couple things. One, I want to thank our sponsor today, Julie Lawton Custom Homes. Julie couldn't be here this morning with us, but thank you, Julie, wherever you are. We appreciate the food and drinks that were provided. And then also we have a few dignitaries with us, so I'll just quickly mention who they are. We have our Assistant City Manager, Tara Finnegan, with us. Tom Edwards, former mayor. Tom, where are you? So back there. Howard Herzog, Civil Service Board member. Paul Watkins, he's the chair of the Library Board of Trustees. When are we breaking ground on that lecture hall, Paul? Couple years? Soon, I hope. Also, I always like to point out we are in the last throes of an election here. We have several city council candidates with us. So first I'll mention my sister, Robin Grant. Good friend of mine and past chair of the Chamber Board, skipper of the Commodores, Joe Stapleton. And where's Jim Mosier? Jim Mosier. Jim's a man of many words but few words, I think, is the best way to describe it. In any event, that's, I think, all. I want to thank the DECA Club for coming again this morning and Sheridan Hurst, their director, for being here. So thank you all, DECA. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rush. He's going to introduce our speaker, and I'll have a few closing remarks at the end. Thank you.
Well, this morning we are pleased to have 4 years ago, I said the new city manager, and now our very experienced city manager. I avoid that word as much as possible. Yes. Grace has been with us since 2018, and the city manager is hired by the city council. City council employs 3 individuals: city manager, city clerk, and city attorney. And it's that team's responsibility to build the rest of the city. She's responsible for 730 full-time and 450 part-time employees, and oversees 11 departments and a budget that's just right around $210 million. It just went up a little bit. She has more than 2 decades experience in government, and her career began at the City of Long Beach, soon shifted to Sunnyvale for 18 years, where she specialized in finance and budgeting. She developed the city's performance-based budget and a 20-year financial plan. And then she served as the city's finance director for 6 years. Then she left Sunnyvale to join the City of Irvine. She initially began as administrative service director. She became the assistant to the city manager and eventually the acting city manager. She has been very important to the City of Irvine in administrative services, community development, transportation, and public works. She holds a bachelor's degree from Columbia University in urban studies and a master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. She's a member of the International Cities Managers Association. She and her husband, Jim, have 2 children, Skylar and Miles, and her hobbies include spending time with her children and their activities, volunteering with Skylar through the National Charity League, and then the surprise to me, canoeing in the bay. Please welcome our city manager, Grace Leung, our experienced and great city manager.
Thank you so much, Rush. I know, I can't believe it's been 4 years now. Sometimes it feels very quick, and sometimes there's some days, maybe at some council meetings, it feels very long as well. Let me start up. So I had traded dates back and forth with Steve and somehow landed on this one, and I realized it's like 4 days before the election. I was like, oh, how did I end up with this slot? So I thought about like different topics to do, and as Rush mentioned, I am hired by the city council, so I have 7 bosses, and I love them all equally, and I'll love all my new ones equally too. So I'm staying away from topics that have to do on the politics side. So I figured I'd cover a little bit about how we're doing on our budget. In the current year, we're wrapping up our last year's fiscal year numbers too, a lot going on that side. We have a really robust capital projects program going on that started in this budget cycle too, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the projects that are happening now, including the library lecture hall and where we're at with that, and just maybe touch on a couple issues. I realized I do some of these presentations in other places, and a lot of our issues are very complex, and to spend the time to set up and talk through them can take, another hour or so, which we don't have. Don't worry, you'll be able to get back to class on time. So I just want to touch on a couple, and then happy to take questions on things as well through all that. So with that, let's dig into our city budget side. So we have our budget cycle is July 1st through June 30th. So we're kind of almost at the midway point of our current budget here, and so it obviously crosses 2 calendar years, so it's the 22-23 budget that we're in right now. And this current budget, so we have gone up over time here, and so we're currently at, this is all funds, so this is all of our funds, $330 million budget, so quite significant. I think the big thing in this year, if you notice looking at this number, is our CIP, which is our capital improvement program. So that's our big projects, the things that like new buildings that we put in, pavement, roads, all that kind of stuff. And look at that, that's a 100% increase in new appropriations that we put in this year. So a sizable CIP program going on. And we had a lot of funding coming in for that. First, we had, we call the American Recovery Act. It was federal funds post-pandemic. We received $10 million for that. And then we had one-time surplus funds left over from prior years. And this council is very good as a policy, and I think this is a great fiscal policy. When you have funds that come in and that are one-time in nature, you want to spend them on one-time expenditures. So you don't end up putting monies into something that you have to figure out how to continue to fund ongoing when you don't have an ongoing revenue source. So this council has opted to put those funds into capital projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So the basis of our budget, and where we really start is what's going to fund the expenditure side. So we really have to start with our revenue sources. And our general fund, which is our largest fund and our primary fund that funds our police, our fire, our parks and recs, our public works operations, all that, the kind of stuff, the bread and butter of city government is our general fund. And our revenue sources, we're very fortunate in our revenue sources. You can see here, in total, we have an adopted budget of $265 million in revenues. 3/4 of that is in our primary taxes. So our property tax, our sales tax, and our TOT, our transient occupancy tax. So those are taxes people pay when you rent out a room, like in our hotels or short-term lodging. And what's interesting about this chart, they actually made this for me where it's on an adopted budget basis here. So what was adopted at the beginning of the year as part of the plan to put the budget together. And on the actual side, and where we've ended up being so strong is, see that 2021 revenue budget of $199 million. We actually came in at 235 on the actuals at the end of that fiscal year. And that was an interesting budget to put together. That was as we were in the throes of the pandemic, and we didn't know which way things were going to be going. I mean, we started reducing our TOT tax down quite a bit because, tourism had stopped, hotels had to be closed, so when were they going to be opening back up again? That sort of thing. So we had very low numbers. You can see, like, we were budgeting 24 million in transient occupancy tax, and then we went down to 6 million, just kind of on a worst case scenario to be conservative on that. But we ended up coming in quite a bit higher. There was really a sharp recovery. So that number actually came in at 235 million, and the current 21-22 number, we're finalizing the books right now on that, but we're looking closer to 260 million on that. So that recovery has continued to be very strong, and it's really driven by these main three revenue sources, and I'll get into that a little bit here. On our sales tax side, we're projecting it to grow to a record 46 million. Really seeing strong auto sales. What we found through the pandemic, if people couldn't travel, they were buying, and they were buying cars. They were buying lots of cars. And I think the only thing that kind of reduced that was just the inventory side of things. You've heard about the supply side, but the pricing of the cars were so high, and the sales tax is based on the value of the car, right? It's a percentage. So that was really going up there. And so that we have surprisingly stayed strong on the sales tax side. And you can see these are numbers. This is just a history, and there's a constant growth here. We went down a little in 1920. That was that start of that pandemic at the last quarter into the next year, but we're coming back up, and it's staying strong. We have more of a flat line here in this current year budget, and that's what we're also projecting going in next year. There was a lot of growth up, and people our consultants and folks out there are saying it's going to kind of stabilize. So that's what we're looking at on our sales tax. And these are our major categories, as I mentioned, so no surprise. A big chunk is our auto and transportation, restaurants and hotels, consumer goods. The good thing is you can see there's no one pie piece that takes all of it, and those are the things you want to look for, on the revenue side, because if you have more diversity, it's just more stable as a revenue source for us. The other thing I want to point out, you can see county pool allocation, 16%. You might say, what's that? That's actually, so when you buy things online, the sales tax that you pay goes into the county, and then they distribute it out. So say you buy something at the local Nordstrom's, if you actually buy on site, we get the sales tax, the percentage. If you buy it on the app online, then actually all the tax goes to the county, and then they distribute a portion of it out. It's kind of interesting, just the way they do that. But we end up with less of the actual sales tax per transaction, but the volumes are so up that the numbers continue to grow on that. So it's kind of interesting. Sales tax and how it operates, the state controls that. And I think how we buy goods is changing over time, and not necessarily the way the sales tax is done doesn't necessarily keep up with that. So I think those are some of the interesting things that kind of happen with this revenue source. Shifting over to the TOT, this is also, we're looking at a record almost 28 million that we're going to look at coming in. And you can see here, you can see the sharp drop-off that happened. So 1920 was part of the pandemic, and 2021 was obviously, mostly pandemic, but really popping up real strong. Very strong tourism, I think, and I think the local tourism that we heard a lot about, people not wanting to necessarily fly, but maybe drive. We were a huge beneficiary of that. And really, I think it's coming from the hotel side and also the short-term rentals, which is a kind of two-edged sword. I'm going to shift from the students to the homeowners who, if you're living next to a short-term rental, it can be challenging, from the quality of life. But on our tourism side, it's been a strong factor for us. And I thought this chart is very interesting too. This, I think, came to us from Newport Beach & Co., who tracks this. But these are showing the average monthly room rates. And look at that room rate for short-term rentals over this past year. So very high numbers, and also on the hotel side too. I want to say pre-pandemic, I think the averages were under that 300 over the whole course of a year, but it's gone up quite a bit. And we think right now it's staying pretty strong. We have a couple more hotels coming on board too that are on the higher end, so we think that that average room rate's going to continue to at least stay stable and grow. But I was surprised to also see that on the short-term rental side too of the average room rate being where it is. And it just shows, I think, the demand going on. I can shift over now to property tax. This is our biggest revenue source, and that's always a good thing from a city side because it's a very stable revenue source. We all pay our property taxes. It has a baseline. There's a cap on that growth of 2% a year, when you're in it, but so therefore it doesn't get hit by the economic factors as quickly as like a sales tax or TOT. You have to pay your property tax each year, so it's a nice stable revenue source. It continues to grow quite strong. The median home prices, it's over 3 million here, and continue the volumes that are going on the sales side, and I'll show you some of the numbers there. This is showing the assessed value, so that what the actual value of the homes are, and the property tax is a percentage of that. And you can see the growth is, that line isn't showing like a dip, it's just showing the growth rate. It had slowed, but then popping up again over this last year, and that all translates straight to a strong property tax revenue for us in that. And then the other thing that we know, and where we're seeing continued activity and growth, the transfer tax, that's a tax paid when a property changes hands on the sales. So when you see these strong numbers over here on the 2021, 22 years, those are just showing that the assessed values are really going up, and that's really helping to drive that increase that we're seeing. As well as on the building permit revenue side, we look for those numbers too as we're developing our forecast, so that means there's activity going, remodels happening, and when there's significant changes to a home, then those get reassessed at a higher value. So we have strong growth throughout. Our community development department, even through the pandemic, has been very, very busy throughout. If you go to that counter, it's a lot of activity going on. We actually, as a side note, put in a new planning management system, which we think is going to help a lot with managing some of the growth and dealing with the transactions. They'll be able to be done more online versus having to come into the counter. So excited about that. Now, on the expenditure side, so we have the revenue side built. Then on our general fund revenue, we're actually, general fund expenditure side, we have a budget of about $244 million. This shows you the breakup of where the main service areas that the budget is composed of. And really, police and fire, I don't think is any surprise, is over half of our general fund budget. And then several other departments that we have in here. If you look at by category, you can see if you're a city, what we're doing is we're providing services. Services are provided by people, so it's our salary and benefit side that's going to be the largest piece of our costs here. And the number is certainly increases with cost of living adjustments, but another thing that's embedded in the salary and benefits is the funding that we're doing to pay down our unfunded pension liability. So we have a CalPERS retirement pension plan. The council, many years ago, made a commitment to really pay down that unfunded liability and not push it to future generations, and has really done a lot of work there and been very aggressive. So we have a required payment we have to make to the CalPERS pension system. We are making more than that. I think the actual required payments in like the 29 million a year. The city has put in a policy to have it at 35 million. Then this past year we increased it to 40 million. So we really are being very aggressive about paying down that unfunded pension liability, and we should be able to pay that off within 10 years. That number will change because a lot of the monies that then go in, they get invested obviously into the broader market by PERS, and what happens to the market, it goes up and down. So we have to adjust for that. But we're on a really good a plan to get that paid down. So that's a big part of that. And then you can also see contract services as a big dollar amount. We do have, while we have a lot of staff, we also do employ a lot of contract, whether it's vendors or in actual services from outside folks, and that allows us to just adjust. When demands are high, we can bring more people in, but we can also then let them go when activity has come down. So we do make a lot of use on the contract side as well. Those are the main things I wanted to point out on that one.
What happened to risk management? That went way down.
Risk management went way down. I think that number actually got adjusted into the internal service charge. It's just the way we're allocating our funds. So we are making sure we have enough liability coverage and all that, and that's what's in there, but I think it's how we distribute it through that. And that's why you can see the internal service charge is also up. That's where we're funding for costs like our IT technical replacement, our fleet, our vehicle replacement funds, and it is like our risk and insurance pieces are all together in there. So I think it's just a way of the allocation. Good catch. The other key pieces that went into this particular budget this year, I talked about the pension, like putting additional money in to pay down our liability. We put in Be Well OC, it's mental health services. We have our own van and team that help address mental health issues, whether for our housed or unhoused folks in our community. It's a dedicated new service being provided. We think we're having good success so far. We started, I want to say February-ish, so we're kind of about 6-7 months in, and we're eager to see how that translates for delivering services for the community, because it's certainly at a significant cost that we've put in. We've put in additional money. A lot of these other things are more on our infrastructure side, really, I would say, to ensure that our fire stations have the appropriate equipment. There's some contract staffing, like I mentioned, our community development counter has been quite busy to maintain that, and some other things in there as well. The budget process, we're actually embarking now on the next year's process for 22-23. We're developing the revenue projections now. We're coming with the year-end report of this last year. We'll go to our finance committee next week and to City Council November 15th, and I think we'll also do our first quarter report of this year too. So all that's going to start to be developed together to build the budget for this next year. And there's, I also bring this up, there's opportunities for the public to be engaged and involved. We typically have a Saturday session in January where we'll go through some of our budget priorities and areas to discuss at a larger policy level for our council. And I think it'll be an interesting one this year since we'll have at least 3 new council members on board. So talk about their priorities as well as we look to develop the budget. The Finance Committee does a thorough review over several meetings in the spring, and then we'll adopt with a public hearing at a council meeting or 2 in June, then to start our next year. Okay, on our capital improvement projects, as you can see from the chart, you know, we do have kind of a record budget here on our CIP side. So just wanted to highlight some of the projects that are going on that we're working on here. Junior lifeguard building, we're super excited about this one. The top is the rendering of what it's going to look like. Quite an improvement from the trailers that are there now. And what's great is it'll be used obviously in the summer for the junior guard program, and then the rest of the year it'll be available. We'll have facility rentals, classes there, and being right on the ocean there on the beach, I think it's going to be a fantastic site there. So we broke ground. You can see our fire chief right there who's in the back here with the shovel. So I think we're all set to go. And the plan is to have it open for the next summer's new junior guard program. So that is going on. Library lecture hall. So it's an expensive project. And I should also mention the CIP environment's tough this year, probably for a little while here, that just the costs with inflation and everything, the cost of everything has gone up. So we've gotten bids coming in, and there's a couple projects I know we've gone back out again, and we said, okay, can we value engineer this and see if we can get the cost down? And now that's just the reality, I think, of what we're dealing with right now. So this is significant, but we're working through it right now. We're scheduled to release the request for qualifications. So to get started on this, the design is done. It's a beautiful building, and if all goes well and then the numbers work out, we'll hopefully be awarding a contract in March, in the spring of next year. And then start the construction. It's going to be significant. You can see a 14-month construction time period. This it's not a straightforward project or building with it, and it's kind of like on this site here, actually. So this area right here will be quite different. So we're excited about that, and this is another public-private partnership, just like the Junior Guard building was, and that's been a really great way to work together with the community through that. Let's see, Superior Avenue pedestrian bridge. Bridge projects are also very expensive. So this one is also coming in pretty high. We actually had to go out a second time. This is one of the projects where we went out first and said, let's see what we can do here. So we have a second set of bids. We're evaluating those right now. It's still a high dollar project, but what's nice about this bridge is it connects with the parking into what do you call it, Sunset Ridge Park, and there we can get more use out of that, because right now, in order to use that park, you're crossing over kind of a major street right there on Superior. So this is kind of in play right now and in discussion for next phases of that. Another big project, this is the Balboa Island drainage system. So Balboa Island is essentially very flat. People keep describing it to me, it's like a bathtub. And when the water comes in, it will fill. You know, we have tide valves, you know, and some of them are manual that we're opening and closing with the weather. So we have a whole design in place right now to do a new, the pump and storm drain system to replace all of that. I think it's much needed and a significant infrastructure project that we're just starting to do on the designs and plans right now, developing those. But this is going to be over several years, about a $16 million project. So quite significant. And we're kind of working on that and setting up the funding to move forward with this project here. And then just in general, our utilities infrastructure, you think we are an older city, over 100 years old. There's a lot of water pipes, sewer pipes, our systems, some of it goes underwater. You know, there's a lot of challenge in maintaining all those, all our utility, and make sure we get clean water, make sure the sewage goes the other way out completely and safely. So continue to work through on that. And our utility side is not part of our general fund. We have a separate fund for the water fund and our sewer fund, and those are funded by rates. So people pay, you know, you have your utility bills that come in, pay your monthly rates. We have to go through a process if we want to increase those rates. We did that, I want to say 2 years ago for our water rates. And when we do that, we go in and we look at not only the cost of what it is to just deliver your water, but also what kind of capital needs we need to replace and rebuild the pipes, and all that goes in to figure out what that rate should be. So we have a set of rate increases there. We're now due to look at our sewer side. Our sewer rates have not been increased in several years, and if you look at our fund balance on our sewer fund, we're actually going to start to go dip really into our reserves there. So we need to evaluate those rates and go in front of our voters, our community, you know, to look at those and get approval by our council on that. So that's going to be coming in the next year. Okay, and then I just wanted to note a couple things. I mean, there's things that we always work on. I think this community, the quality of life is very important. So we always are working on things like looking at whether it's the airport or homeless issues, looking at the short-term rentals and impacts on the communities. All of that will continue to be something we wrestle with and find the right balance on. And I think there's always never one solution for those, so we work back and forth. But then I was thinking about some of the other things that are kind of newer that are really hitting on us and then are going to affect us longer term. And I would really say one of the first things, the employee recruitment retention, is a big deal right now. We're really, I don't think, and it's not just us, I think it's not, and it's not just local government, I think it's on the private sector too, is finding and maintaining and retaining good quality employees. You know, we have 4-year contracts with all our labor groups that we negotiated with, but the council did also go back in and adjust the cost of living, because when we did those negotiations, it was at a different time than the inflationary environment now. And those are some of the things that you have to adjust and adapt to. We've looked at you know, post-pandemic, there's a lot of interest in more telecommuting, and so to try to balance alternative work schedules to also help retain employees, looking at different tools there. And also, frankly, I think we're finding a couple things. I think it's finally hitting where most of the boomers are now exiting the labor, their professional careers, and so we're seeing a lot more on the retirement side, coupled with people, I think, post-pandemic evaluating their lives and looking at maybe not finishing out and retiring early. You know, I have our finance director, as an example, who started about 1.5 years ago, and I thought we were going to have him till he retired. He was in his mid-40s. He and his family said, you know, we're looking for a lifestyle change, and they moved to Tennessee. So that was kind of abrupt, you know, and unanticipated. And we're actually finding that in our police and fire side too, where people would typically stay once they're hired on through retirement, are actually leaving earlier. And that's just a lot of elements that we're working through right now. And our recruitment levels are at a very elevated level at this point. Our HR department's very busy through that. So I think that's something we're going to continue to be grappling with over this next year, at least. Another one is on the general plan side. That's our main kind of blueprint for our city and its path. We got our housing element certified. It was a slog to do, and we're one of 13 cities now with a certified housing element, so that's great. But now it's the next steps to that. We have to go to a vote because of our charter. If we have more than 100 units being added to our plan, we'll have to go to the voters. So we're planning for that to be in March of 2024. And then the rest of the general plan also has to follow an update with that. So that's certainly taking up a lot of our time and continuing for us. And then the other thing I just put on here, I think this is the longer term, is we keep hearing on the climate change side of things, whether it's with the drought and addressing issues with the drought. Sea level rise is certainly putting a lot of impacts on looking at the designs and changes of homes, particularly in our peninsula. This term of environmental justice is very strong with the Coastal Commission that we have to work closely with and get approvals from for a lot of different types of projects. It really was a factor in our CAD, the dredging project that just got through Coastal. So a lot of these things I think will continue to be a factor for us as we kind of look at our future here. And I think that's my presentation. There is a weekly newsletter that goes out if you sign up for it. I think it could just provide you some good updates that we try to keep everybody informed on there. And then hopefully I left some time for questions. Did I do all right? Thanks. All right, thank you, everyone. Yeah. Oh, terrific.
I'm very interested in your comments about how to address some of the homeless problems that we have in Newport, particularly the increased tents and the transportation center.
Yes, yeah, that's a good question, and it's one I think I've worked on the entire period of time here, and it's a complex one. So we've certainly put a lot of resources and strategies. We have our departments working together in a kind of cross-departmental team to work through it. So we have our police, our fires involved, public works to help on the cleanup. I have a homeless services coordinator that I moved from another department into this role to really dedicate and coordinate services on. We developed a partnership with Costa Mesa, so for the housing, for a shelter navigation center, we have 20 beds dedicated for us there. But it's a stubborn problem too that will, there's a lot of mix to it, right, of how to get to the solution to it. We certainly spend a lot of time up at the transportation center. We are taking a look at that site itself. Is there some adjustments that can be done? We have to work together with OCTA and the Irvine Company through that. And that's been a challenging site. We offer service, but they are ones that are a little more stubborn in accepting that. So we do spend a lot more time there. We use our Be Well van service, probably does daily stops right now, or probably even more than daily there. So we'll keep working at it. I think one of the challenges is people who have, the longer they're out on the street, it gets a little more entrenched, and to try to bring them out of that. I want to say, Tara, they say maybe like 40 to 50 touches with a person before we get them to work into accepting service and move. And that's what we're really looking for, because we want that long-term resolution where they end up into a path of going into housing. And so we are looking for additional bed space too, to have more on that side. I think with the housing element and more housing units, I mean, that's part of the solution of having affordable housing and also permanent supportive housing. We've been looking, we have 2 developers out there looking for a site space to be able to do permanent supportive housing to move people through. And that's just been challenging because the land is so expensive here in Newport Beach. So it's a tough issue that we're continuing to work through. It's actually private donation. So there's the Junior Guard Foundation put together and fundraised fundraised quite a bit on that site, and then also on the library lecture hall as well. It's through a foundation. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I have a question from the topic of your city budget. How did the increase in property and sales tax after COVID benefit our city?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. And we were very worried, when we went through the pandemic, you think there's all the elements of the pandemic was new for all of us, right? I mean, a worldwide pandemic. And one of our biggest concerns is how do we budget out it? Like, what do we budget for, and where are we going to, where are the revenues going to go? And we were very fortunate here in Newport Beach that they just really recovered very strong. Through that. And through that happening, we ended up with surplus funds, both because our sales tax, our transient occupancy tax in particular, came in higher than we had budgeted. We were able to use those surplus funds to fund a lot of the capital improvement projects that you see that I listed there. So, we look like we're continuing on that recovery. So I think we're on a good path. Thank you. That's kind of, it depends, because I don't think there's a cut and dry how it would proceed through that. I will start with also our airport, what do you call our aviation policy, right? Is that? Yeah. A17 is absolutely against any runway extension, so that's in our, from our council policy side, and we have always advocated for that. And you're right, Mayor Muldoon sent a letter in. We've certainly conveyed that, and we're very strong on that. And everything we're hearing from the county is that there's nothing in the planning works. Obviously, things can change and work through. Because it's hard to answer because we'd have to figure out what our basis for that lawsuit would be if we were going to go down a legal path for that. And I'm not sure right now what that standing would be for us to sue on that. So I think we'd have to evaluate that. But I will say that we would look at every option that we have if we found expansion plans even starting to generate or begin.
Does the city council tell the city attorney what to do, or does he have say in it? How does
Yes, we actually work with our city council. That's why you'll sometimes see on our council agenda meetings a closed session scheduled, and those typically deal with litigation matters, and those we work together, the city attorney works together with the council to get approval if we go into litigation of that, something of that size. Yeah. I think can I take one question right back there? Yeah.
How is our water supply? Are we considered to be in a drought?
We are considered to be in a drought by the state. The state's declared a drought. We actually are very fortunate on our water. A large part of our water source is groundwater, and we have a very large groundwater basin here. So we don't rely as much as on water coming in imported down, from either I think either the Hetch Hetchy or the Colorado side. So we're very fortunate with that. However, as the state as a whole is in drought, so we're part of that mandate, if you will, on that. And we do currently have in place some restrictions, I think for watering 3 days a week, not any ornamental kind of watering there. So there's a couple, restrictions in place there. But we in Orange County, and we particular for the city, are in a very good place from the water source side.
Last question, public schools. How are they doing? How much does our budget go to public schools? And are we getting back to public schools? Do you have anything?
Well, so the schools, they get a portion of the property tax themselves, and that comes directly from a transaction through the state side. So we don't directly fund or from the financial side. We certainly work together with the school districts, more in partnership, but from the funding perspective, that happens between the state and the school districts there.
Our money goes to the state. It's very confusing. And then the state distributes the funding to our schools.
Yes, yeah, there's a whole formula based on I think the number of students on the enrollment there, so that, yeah, and there's some minimums too. I think there's some state restrictions, or what do you call them? So that there's a certain amount that has to go to the schools, so that's all calculated, but that's not, fortunately, not for the cities. We're not part of that. Yeah.
Jim Mosier has a question.
In the introduction, Rush said that when you were at Sunnyvale for many years, you were immersed in a concept called performance-based budgeting. Could you explain what that is and why you've been advocating for that in Newport Beach?
So performance-based budgeting is looking at allocating your funds based on looking at performance metrics. So we had a whole system developed in Sunnyvale where there were metrics for every, frankly, for every service, every department that we went through in doing that. I think those can work. I think you need to have metrics to determine your allocation of resources, but you have to find the right balance of how you do that. I think one of the challenges in Sunnyvale, and in fact, Sunnyvale has pulled quite a bit away from that, is you have to balance how much time and upkeep it is to put those metrics together and allocate through those. So I think for us here, and particularly they're useful if you're looking at your resources and if you're having shortfalls and deficits. So then you really want to have a prioritization of where you're going to put your funding sources. I think we're a little fortunate here that we are, I don't think there's an expenditure problem necessarily in the city. I think it's the management of our resources into the future to maintain sustainability, but I don't think there's an expenditure pressure here in the same way. But I do feel like metrics are important to evaluate as you have new priorities come into us or new enhancement considerations. So we'll continue to work on that, but I have to balance that with the workload of the staff in terms of maintaining a system of that size and nature.
One more question. Half a question.
Affordable housing. Where are you looking? How can there be affordable housing in Newport Beach? And what does that do to our demographics? We're very interested in that.
Yes, and we've certainly, that was a big topic that we covered, going a lot of discussion points on that through the housing element, putting the housing element together. And I think on our website, you'll see quite a bit on there. So we have, I forgot what they're called, but there's areas of potential housing opportunities that are set in that housing element. A lot of it's in the airport area, and then some other areas too. Affordable, you're right, is kind of relative. There's a calculation on that, of how they do that based on a median income. That's set by the federal government, and we are now, from the state, mandated to provide a certain amount of housing. So our total allocation is, I want to say 4,800, of which I think about half of that has to be affordable based on the federal guidelines. So we have a plan that's certified in place for housing to be developed. We are not developers ourselves, but those are now in place, and we will see how that goes. It's the most amount of housing statewide, and and certainly in the city ever to be planned for. So we'll see what that looks like.
Apartments and townhouses and homes, or is it single-family homes?
No, where the state's trying to go is a little more high density, so it would be more in the types of like townhouses, apartments, accessory dwelling units, kind of the granny units in back. Those also are factored in. Yeah, so all kinds of housing. Yeah, it is a whole other subject. All right. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you've seen that being a city manager is not an easy job. And number one, and number two, that we're in good hands with ours. So with that, and some good questions from the audience. One bad one, and I won't tell you who it came from. I now have to bring back up our business mayor, Steve Rosansky, who will close us out.
Thank you, Rush. Thank you, Grace. Great overall discussion of our budget and things that are going on here in town. I'm sure we probably could have added another hour of subject matter, but suffice it to say that's enough for today. So I do want to point out that we did have a few late-minute arrivals, or last-minute arrivals. Keith Curry, former mayor. Our fire chief back there, Jeff Boyles. Thank you for coming. And the chair of our board and one of our Navigate committee members, Chris Delfs. So we've come through a hugely busy schedule of events here, and I'm looking at November as downtime. But I wrote out the list here of things that we're going to be doing, and it's far from downtime. So if you're interested in joining us again this month, we have our business luncheon, networking luncheon, November 9th at the Bahia Corinthian Yacht Club. Please join us for that. It's 11:30 to 1:30. The next night, our Navigate Young Professional Groups is going to have a dinner at the Bahia Corinthian Yacht Club again. And we're going to have a presentation from a woman who's going to talk about dressing for success. And especially for young professionals, might not be familiar with different types of ways to dress at different types of situations, whether you're in a business meeting, going to a cocktail party, business cocktail party, or you're at a convention or something. So she's going to be discussing all of that. That's November 10th. Our mixer this month is going to be at Muldoon's, November 17th. Next month, our Wake Up Newport meeting will be here on December 1st. Our speaker will be Gary Sherwin. He's the head of our Conference and Visitor Bureau here, Visit Newport Beach. I think he's bringing Corey Kramer with him, and he's going to be giving us an overview of the new Pendry Hotel. It used to be the Fashion Island Hotel. It's going to be transformed over the next year into the Pendry, which is, you know, a whole nother step up in class. And they have some big plans for that, so I'm looking forward to that. On December 13th, as we've discussed here, we have an election coming up. On December 13th, the new city council will be sworn in, and they'll select a new mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. After the meeting, we're going to be having a big party over at the Back Bay Bistro. So if you're interested in that, you can join us for that. That's December 13th. And then our biggest event of the year, Boat Parade, December 14th to the 18th, is going to sail once again, 114 years and going strong. So please join us down at the harbor side, or bring out your boat if you have one, and sign up for the parade, even better. And last but not least, we are going to be launching an auction, online auction, to help support the boat parade, probably in about towards the end of November. So look for that as well. That's all I have for today. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month.